All right, everyone, we are back for part part A, section 2, types of empirical research for HED 241 biostatistics. This lecture covers section 2 in making sense of statistics. This is from your white book. Again, make sure you have read that section before you watch this lecture. When we talk about different types of empirical research, we often discuss whether the research is experimental or non-experimental. Our textbook stated that we all conduct informal experiments in our everyday lives. For example, we might try a new laundry detergent, and we might consider whether our clothes are cleaner using the new detergent or the old detergent. An experiment is a study in which treatments are given to see how participants respond to them. In our example, the new laundry detergent is a treatment, and cleaner clothes are the response. Another example in our textbook is that a waiter might try to be more friendly to see if it increases his or her tips. In this example, the friendlier waitress is the treatment, and more tips is a response. In an experiment, the treatments are called the independent variable, and the responses are called the dependent variable. Independent variables are administered so researchers can observe possible changes in the dependent variable. The purpose of an experiment is to identify cause and effect relationships. In looking at our example of friendlier waitresses or waiters earning more tips, we would say that the possible cause is the waitress being friendlier. The possible effect is more tips. We as researchers are interested in finding out whether the increased friendliness of the waiter or waitress caused those increased tips. Your textbook indicates that there are many alternative explanations for increased tips. We know that some informal experiments can be misleading. Suppose the waiter or waitress notices that when he or she is friendlier, tips get larger. Whether the increased friendliness caused the increase in tips or the customer was feeling more generous that night is not clear. Perhaps a newspaper article was published that urged people to be more generous because of the lower rate of pay of waitstaff. Perhaps the waiter was not only more friendly, but also more efficient, and it was the efficiency that caused the increase in tips. The possibilities are endless unless the experiment is planned in advance to specifically eliminate them. So how could an experiment on friendliness and tipping work? For instance, we could have a waiter be friendlier to every alternate party of customers. Those customers would be the experimental group. The remaining customers would receive the normal amount of friendliness, would be referred to as the control group. In addition, we can monitor the waiter's behavior to make sure it is the same for both groups of customers, in all respects except for the degree of friendliness. We would then use statistics to compare the average tips earned under the more friendly conditions with those under the less friendly conditions. A non-experimental study, which is sometimes called a descriptive study, is defined as a study in which observations are made to determine the status of what exists at a given point in time without the administration of treatments. An example may be a survey in which the researcher wants to determine participants' attitudes. Let's say the researcher wants to determine students, who are the participants, attitudes towards older adults. The researcher tries not to change the participants' attitudes. They just want to measure what the students' attitudes are. If the sample is properly drawn and the questions are well crafted, a researcher can obtain solid data on the attitudes held by the students. Note that the researcher who did a non-experimental study on attitudes has not gathered data on how to change attitudes. To do this, the researcher would need to conduct an experiment. Remember, non-experimental study is one with when no treatments are administered. So that is the end of Part A, Section 2. you will notice that these questions are at the end of section 2 in your textbook. These questions make up the rest of your assignment 1. Go through, answer these questions following the directions within your assignment 1, and submit it by the due date. Again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to get in touch with me, and have a wonderful day.